Krypton meets Marvel, Superman's rival shakes the universe. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 46. Angry Charles. When she came out of the base under the dam, Jean Grey suddenly looked back at the deep passage behind her. Thinking of the plump figure just now, she couldn't help but draw a trace of memory again, and even thought of the extremely legendary female character. White Queen Emma? But shouldn't she have been imprisoned long ago and permanently guarded by the military? Jean Grey shook her head. She had also heard of this woman, but the two of them didn't have any communication. Putting down his thoughts, the Blackbird fighter slowly took off from the sky and flew towards the Xavier Academy. Bang! But when flying over New York, a figure jumped out of the hatch. It was Su Chen, who directly crossed a beautiful flight trajectory and flew back to the penthouse in his building. Come back so soon? Diana, who was wearing a long white dress, stood on the stairs with a statue carved. At the moment, she couldn't help but ask when she saw the extra figure on the balcony. Well, the problem is solved. Su Chen smiled and said. It was only half a day before he went out in the morning, and during this period, he was not only captured by Nightcrawler, who disappeared in the future, but also stopped by the Fantastic Four, who came to stop him. Go to Stryker's lair and destroy it completely. This day, it can be described as colorful. The follow-up matters here will be handed over to Mutant himself. Charles in the Xavier Academy was informed of these documents, and also knew that the brutality behind the Stryker general far exceeded his imagination. He was involved in a series of crimes that seriously violated the spirit of humanity, such as imprisonment, dissection, and human experiments. Damn Stryker, I didn't expect him to go so far. Charles's hand trembled as he held the evidence. Then what are we going to do? Storm said. Give these things to the official government? In the conference room, the hopeful eyes of the teachers and students present came over, and even the windows were filled with childish faces. After pondering for a long time, Charles slowly sighed and said, blind weakness just brings more harm, not the key to solving the problem. Maybe I need to learn Magneto's way of doing things. Then let's go to the White House tonight. After speaking, he let out a long sigh, which was enough to show that he had struggled for a long time with this decision. The teachers and students present were also shocked. Going to the White House? Importantly, what did they hear? Learn how Magneto behaves. Wolverine Logan couldn't help but raised her eyebrows, and she couldn't help but murmured that the old man in front of her was finally hard-hearted. Just after announcing the night's action, Shadowcat Katie, the little slimeworm, made a phone call and said, Sue, come tonight or not, we're going to go to the White House tonight. Ah. Su Chen on the other end was very confused and couldn't understand what she was talking about. Katie had to explain, the professor is angry. I rarely see him angry, so tonight the professor may go to the White House to talk to the president. Guess, the president will pee his pants. I see. Su Chen, who was about to take a bath, just shook his head, thinking to himself, what is there to call himself about this nonsense? For ordinary people, the president is indeed the object of awe of a secular power, but for a person who often uses to those who speak with fists, the president is nothing but a fart. Okay, let's play at night. No, the professor didn't go there to play, just be careful, don't be too naughty. Su Chen touched his head, and the two exchanged greetings for a while, hang up the phone. At night, the moon and stars are rare. Washington, D.C., the White House Rotunda is the place where the rights of the entire country are symbolized. It is also the place where the president works. Many signed laws are born from here. At the moment, a legal document called the Mutant Registration Act has been presented on President Johnson's safflower table. As long as he gently signs his name, the way the entire country treats mutant will be completely changed. With one order, millions of people will be affected and suppressed, which is the terrible power that Jensen has as president today. Just as he continued to bury his head on his desk by himself, reviewing the details of the Mutant Act, a violent thunder finally sounded from the night outside the window. Boom! The thunder rang out, and even the entire dimly lit office was filled with blue light. President Jensen was startled and raised his head, but what surprised him even more was that strange figures appeared in the office in front of him, as if they appeared in front of him instantly. Damn, who are you? The guards. Come for me. President Jensen stood up angrily and shouted hoarsely. But through the window, he saw the security guards on every patrol outside. They were as motionless as wooden people, as if they were completely petrified. At this time, Charles, who was sitting in the wheelchair, whispered, Mr. President, I think we came with sincerity. In the sky, another thunder sounded completely. Episode 47. Angry. Jensen swallowed, knowing that the surrounding scenery was completely frozen, like a still portrait, and the patrolling guards inside could not move at all. Looking at this group of mutants who are doing bad things, Jensen felt the taste of fear from the bottom of his heart for the first time. What exactly do you want to do? We came here to discuss an argument. Maybe you should see what your subordinate General Stryker did to our mutant. Charles in the wheelchair said calmly. Jensen looked at the document handed over nervously, his face turned ashen. Imprisoning mutant, human experiment transformation, anatomy experiment. This. He couldn't help but be surprised. He never expected that Stryker had secretly made so many small moves, and even the assassination of the president was planned by him. Damn bastard. Jensen couldn't help scolding. Charles frowned, his hands clenched the armrests of the wheelchair, obviously digging some bad impressions in his memory. He stabilized his mind, and said, "It turns out that some of mutants' things are still from you, handwriting." Jason looked surprised. Charles continued methodically, "So in the face of this evidence, I hope you will discard some of your previous misconceptions, as well as the Mutant Registration Act document on your desk. I think you should be more careful." This time, cold sweat left on Jensen's face, and he realized that he was a person with no secrets. "That's all I want to say. I hope you must choose carefully." There seemed to be a long sigh in the office, followed by another flash of lightning resounding outside. After a while, President Jensen, who had been bowing his head and didn't dare to look directly, slowly raised his head, only to find the house in front of him. There was no one in the hall. The figure just now disappeared without a trace, and outside the window, the patrolling guards slowly paced outside. Everything seemed to tell him that everything just now seemed to be an illusion. But when Jensen bowed his head, the desktop was actually the documents just left. It's all true. Jensen's back was instantly soaked with sweat, his face became very ugly, and the fear in his heart was even more haunted. This is also the time when Charles was so angry. This time, he didn't even care about maintaining the entire social order, so he appeared in the Oval Office so arrogantly to vent his dissatisfaction. He is forbearing and obedient, all for the purpose of admonishing Mutant to restrain his ability and not to cross the bottom line of the whole order, just like he has always warned himself not to use spiritual ability privately on others. However, when others bullied too much and broke the whole rules, Charles had temporarily put down the rules in his heart and issued a warning to the president of the White House for the first time. Come without a trace, it is a small way to let everyone see the strength of teachers and students of Xavier College. In the entire house, only a desolate back slowly trembled, and a resentful voice slowly lingered in it. Mutant. Let me see. The next day. The matter related to the Mutant Registration Act was unexpectedly not brought up, and even Your Excellency, who was supposed to be there, did not come to the House of Representatives. In the Oval Office, President Johnson rested his hands on the table, and a pair of sullen eyes swept across the people present. Bang! A pen was smashed to the ground. Jason asked angrily, "What about Stryker himself?" "Sir, I can't contact him anymore, including the subordinates of his unit, who haven't seen him in person since last night." An aide wiped his cold sweat and said, I definitely can't get in touch with him. The base he built was completely raided, and he was sent this document and slapped it in my face. How dare he have the face to see me?" Jensen was angry. Unreachable growled, and a heavy document was thrown directly on the face of the staff in front of him. The aide wiped his cold sweat and picked it up carefully. He just glanced at the contents of the document and was secretly shocked. He never expected that General Stryker would do such an excessive thing in private. "I am afraid it was only the contents of this page that were exposed to the public. It may cause a lot of pressure from fishing reels. Catch, let me want him." "That's right, from now on, Stryker's general status will be revoked." Jason scolded, and then his eyes stared fiercely at the man in the corner. A man with white temples. "General Ross, I heard that your subordinates have been following the Super Soldier Project." "Sir, that's definitely, this plan even has good results." General Ross, who was standing in the corner, never expected that he would be named. Since the Hulk incident, he has been lonely for a long time. Hearing this, he knew his opportunity was coming. "Very well, from now on, funds, personnel, whatever you want, you are responsible for keeping an eye on Mutant." After Jensen finished speaking, he immediately looked at the only woman on the court and said, "Ms. Hill, I think the security of the White House needs to be strengthened. I don't want Mutant to come in silently next time. This is the first time." Twice. Hill, the deputy director of SHIELD, was very cold-hearted, just nodded and said, "I will respond to the situation." Seemingly dissatisfied with this attitude, the president said one more sentence: "You'd better emphasize to Director Nick that there will be no next time, otherwise don't blame me for cutting off your lengthy expenses." Having said that, all the taxis present understood that Your Excellency encountered unpleasant things last night. Obviously, Mutant's discussion went directly to the White House and left a bad impression on this grumpy President Johnson. In the presence, Mr. Reed, who was the Fantastic Four, was the most restrained. When President Johnson looked directly at him, he couldn't help rubbing his head ashamed. As a guy who concentrated on scientific research, he was indeed not suitable for facing this a serious occasion. "Mr. Reed, you're one of the smartest people in the country. Tell me how to fix Mutant's problem." Episode 48. Prelude to the Great War. Mr. Fantastic Reed is indeed one of the best superintelligence people in the world. Even if he wants to rank in Marvel, many good people will rank him either first or second, even if he is still underage. Compared with MIT's Tony, it is no less. Definitely, compared to Tony, his emotions are a bit lacking, more like a nerd who often spends his time in the lab. At the moment, facing the question from President Jensen, Reed looked a little hesitation: how to solve the problem of mutant with different abilities, this kind of thing involving the category of human sociology, it was a bit stumped for him. This. "Mr. President, I think I, a science student, really don't know what to do," Reed could only say apologetically. President Jensen didn't look as good as him, but he continued to scold him angrily. "Reed, are you worthy of the government? You count the knowledge and research in your head, how much money I asked the government to allocate to your fund. A total of more than $2 billion. Then what are the results of your research?" Reed's face was even more distressed, but he said sickly, "You know that some projects take time, and they are still in the process of research." "In other words, no," said President Jensen. "I think you Fantastic Four spend more time on research projects than you spend on fighting supercriminals." This is true. Since the genetic mutation caused by the solar storm a few years ago, Reed may have been relieved of his vanity in order to live up to the expectations of the public for his Mr. Fantastic. The Fantastic Four often go out to fight supercriminals and enjoy the public cheers, so that his own scientific research time is obviously less invested. It is indeed a lot of disappointment for many governments who have invested in their own high IQ. Since this is the case, you don't need to say more, and don't spend so much time researching for me, but let you Fantastic Four attack me Mutant. You and General Ross, regardless of support, have been keeping an eye on Mutant for me all this time," President Jensen said unequivocally. Mr. Reed's expression turned ugly for a moment, and he smiled bitterly. "But the Fantastic Four are fighting criminals. Even if they want to capture Mutant, they must violate the Constitution." He glanced at the contents of the documents scattered on the ground just now, and felt some sympathy for Mutant. At the moment, after hearing the president's suggestion, he couldn't help but resist. After all, he knew more or less about Charles's contribution to Mutant. Didn't violate the Constitution?" President Johnson shook his head and smiled. "Everyone present, can you tell me what criminal law the most famous mutant violated?" Ms. Hill said silently, "Separatism, terrorist attacks. The Mutant Brotherhood, to which Magneto belongs, is a well-known terrorist organization, and there is reason to believe that Magneto tried to kill the entire New York City people a few months ago." What the deputy director of SHIELD was talking about was the accident with the genetic transformation equipment. Although he didn't go to the scene in person, he could always figure out some clues through some cobweb trails. "Did you hear that?" President Jensen glanced at Reed and said righteously, waving his fists, "Terrorist organizations, Brotherhood, Magneto, these are all guys who have seriously violated the law and are still at large. I think the Fantastic Four, even they are under obligation, and they should be arrested." The wry smile on Reed's face became more and more revealing. The obligation to fight criminals, and even the guilt of the investment of government funds, did make it a little difficult for him to step down. But no matter what, Brotherhood is indeed a social cancer, and Reed's conscience is okay. There is no psychological burden at all, but the safety risks should be considered. Without further ado, the nerd Reed also nodded heavily and said, "This time I won't let you down." "Better so," President Johnson said quietly. "Okay, that's it, you all keep an eye on me, and don't forget that Stryker guy, catch me back as soon as there is news." Since then, the meeting in the Oval Office of the White House has officially ended. Ms. Hill, the deputy director of SHIELD, left first and did not stay to chat with them. General Ross on the side came directly to Reed and shook hands with each other. "Next, it's time for us to work together." General Ross is not a person who likes to deal with but it is obviously different today. He was suddenly reused, and his face was full of joy. He had been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. Happy cooperation. Reed had a lot of dealings with the military, and many new weapons were developed by his studio, so it was very natural to greet each other. Mutant is very troublesome, do you have any clues? Without saying a few words, the content has already turned to work. Reed's understanding of brotherhood was also very lacking, but he remembered a figure from yesterday, the man with unparalleled strength who directly took down their Fantastic Four. Maybe, I want to ask the general to help me find someone first. That person doesn't have any social security records or identity information. I can't find this person from the National Information Curry. Mutant? Should, yes. Reed thought to himself that the man had snatched Nightcrawler from his hands, and he was a mutant anyway. A person who has no identity information in society looks a bit like a Brotherhood terrorist, which is a breakthrough. General Ross also instantly understood Reed's intention. Well, I'll let people call the surveillance video from across the country when I go back. I don't believe that this person can't be found. General Ross said with oath. And the man to be investigated is none other than Su Chen. Born from Paradise Island, he never stayed in the outside world until his childhood. Naturally, he had no identity information. After he came out of the outside world, he was not aware of this problem, so he could not help but find the problem. A crisis is pointing at him. Shortly after, in the top-floor apartment, Su Chen, who was sleeping soundly in the room, suddenly sat up from the couch, and a pair of black and white clear eyes flashed an indescribable meaning. Finally, he whispered slowly. P.S. I have been very busy with work recently. I have asked for leave tomorrow to code words. I will try my best to code 20,000 words on Friday. It will be put on the shelves in the early morning of Saturday, that is, at 12 o'clock on Friday. All chapters will be released at one time. Episode 49. The storm is coming. Come on, they're finally here. Inside the room, a voice murmured slowly. In the vast cosmic starry sky, a long sword-shaped interstellar warship came across countless light years. After the fleet that entered the solar system received the signal, it came non-stop from the endless dark ghost area. This sword-type ship is the Kryptonian battleship led by General Zod. When it broke through the wormhole and arrived, it suddenly set off an abnormal wave that trembled throughout the solar system. The abnormal energy reading caused the sun's corona to explode suddenly. Many planetariums on Earth have received this abnormal signal from the inner space. SHIELD even mobilized the satellites in orbit for the first time to observe. From this moment, many people in the know only know that a very strange energy fluctuation has swept the solar system, and an unknown object has quietly arrived. The sword-type ship's shuttle started, and the bow of the ship continued to move forward like a sharp blade. Until this moment, people still don't know what this quietly approaching object is. After the satellite communication in space orbit, a cool-looking sword-shaped warship was captured, quickly heading towards the back of the moon. The fleeting flight trajectory made people feel chills, and the back was instantly pierced by sweat. Battleship? Alien? War. Words of association continued to burst out of their minds, and they already knew clearly that human beings are not alone in this universe, and that an unknown life is approaching the Earth. Will it bring war or peace? Without thinking too much, the aircraft carrier of SHIELD issued an alarm for the first time, and the Delta Wing of the SHIELD headquarters in Washington, D.C. also conveyed orders at all levels to all parts of the world. Ready for battle. Activate underground nuclear facilities at all levels, all nuclear engineering troops stand by, and prepare for battle. A first-level order was issued from the Oval Office of the White House. The loud voice slowly rose from the sky, and White House President Jensen directly put down his official business and directly boarded the plane for an emergency liftoff under the escort of security. The plane, Air Force One, is the safest plane in the world and serves as the mobile command room of President Jensen, where he will be responsible for remotely controlling all of the country's internal affairs at the moment when the apocalypse may come, until the crisis is over. At the moment when Air Force One took off, there was a fighter jet formation responsible for escort, and a SHIELD aircraft carrier was responsible for the most important security work at a high altitude in the distance. Not to mention the road-based missile force on the ground, which locked the safety of the high altitude around Air Force One from afar. As long as there are unfamiliar flight objects approaching in a radius of tens of kilometers, it will face the consequences of the artillery fire. All of the above are preparations for a possible battle. It's just that the people in the city don't know it, and they don't even know that there is an alien warship flying in space, and people just go to work and work according to the rules. The well-informed high-level society will not announce the seriousness of the problem to the public at all. After all, this will cause irrepressible social panic and panic. At least, under this night and twilight, after all, some people still know. Charles, who was staying at Xavier Academy, closed his eyes, sighed helplessly, and then asked the students in the academy not to leave the school gate. Su Chen, who is located on the top floor of the villa, has also come over. The image of Krypton's collapse in his sleep continues to flash into his mind. Under the indescribable perception, he already knows that General Zod is very far away from him. Near. So, he looked up at the sky. The apartment he was in was located on the top floor of a building of more than 300 meters. This height could overlook the entire city of Manhattan, New York. There was no obstruction to the field of vision, and the looming moon in the sky seemed to be within reach. Su Chen squinted his eyes, and he could see a flight trajectory in space flying towards the back of the moon. It's too far. Su Chen only felt that his eyeballs were a little dry. He had already confirmed the arrival of Zod, and subconsciously wanted to tell Diana by the pillow, but found that she was beautiful. He patted his mind, and only then did he know that Diana was out. But what to do with this fleet? Su Chen felt a faint excitement in his heart, which was the instinct of his life. But just as he was about to set off, he frowned. Someone was trying to break into his house? Inside the high-rise building to which they belonged, the figures of soldiers stayed under the stairs, and the figures of General Ross and the Fantastic Four were among them. "General, is this here?" Reed asked. "Yes, this guy is very rich and has lived on the top floor of a high-rise building for a long time." General Ross nodded. "Yesterday they did target this person through the country's surveillance video, and also confirmed that this guy named Su Chen without any identifying information. The origin is a mystery." "Well, let's make a quick decision. SHIELD has an internal decision that requires us to attend as soon as possible." "That's definitely." General Ross glanced at his confidant. In order to deal with that guy, he even called in Bronsky, who could control the Hulk. "Very good, then we will attack the building now, and the gunship outside will lock the direction of the high-rise building for me." Episode 50. Remarks on shelves. After struggling for more than half a month, the most critical moment finally came. The book is finally on the shelves. Now Feilu has already been on the decline. Thinking about Feilu, it is a website that relies on fans to rise, but now it has completely turned. Writing fans can't get good recommendations. Even if the subscription is relatively low, they are eligible to get it. This is an embarrassing situation now. Therefore, many readers have complained that no one has written Marvel fans anymore, mainly because of the environment. The original route of the website has destroyed the creative motivation of fan authors. Definitely, the author is just a 3 to 5 person who eats a lot of food. In his spare time, he is full of love for the Marvel DC world, so he further stepped into this quagmire. So first of all, thank you for the flowers, evaluation tickets, rewards, and monthly passes along the way. In the days when there was no income on the shelves, there were only these data, which made the author feel warm, so thank you again for your support. And then, still have to fulfill my promise, chapter 10 on the first day. For this reason, the author even has to take a day off, and try to send the 2W word on the code on this day at one time. Furthermore, the first order is really critical. This is related to the arrangement of future operation recommendations, and determines whether this book is the fate of a dragon or an insect. So, I still have to ask for your help. Episode 51. The first battle will be released. Outside the balcony of the apartment on the top floor of the building, there was the faint sound of an engine as a helicopter gunship was trying to get close to the building. Su Chen on the balcony squinted, not expecting that he would be surrounded by heavy siege. These well-trained soldiers actually tried to capture him? For what? Su Chen himself didn't know what to do, and he didn't even know the president's order to arrest Brotherhood, but he found himself by accident. But he knew that he was a little angry. Meow. The two little orange cats under their feet let out a meow, and seemed to sense the sullenness of their master, and the young plush body was arched beside their feet. The very humane behavior eased the anger in Su Chen's heart. He lowered his body and held the two kittens in his arms, straightening their fur. However, the roar of the engine outside became more and more resounding. Su Chen frowned, and for no reason, there was a knock on the door of his apartment. Under his perception, the number of people outside was nowhere to be seen, a group of unfamiliar soldiers, and the Fantastic Four who had been met by fate. Su Chen did not know what they were doing. The look directly angered him. Lie down under the cupboard and wait for me to come back. A gentle word rarely came out of Su Chen's mouth. The two kittens meow very well behaved and lie on the fabric under the cabinet. Then, Su Chen's figure gradually walked out. At this time, the gunship outside seemed to want to observe the inside of the apartment. The whole aircraft was very close to the balcony. The driver in the cockpit even saw the decoration inside and Su Chen in the house through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The target character is in there, other than that, there is no character there. 35. But at this moment, the driver saw Su Chen's gaze and looked over, but the dull eyes made his heart tremble inexplicably, and the figure on the opposite side raised his hand and a flower pot flew over. There was a burst of roar whistling in the air. Just after a flower pot was carried out with a huge force, there was a terrifying sound like a cannonball. The driver's heart fell to the bottom of the valley. Even if he had already controlled the distance between each other, he was still hit by this force in an instant. Boom! The propeller was smashed by itself, not to mention the entire glass of the oncoming aircraft was smashed through, and the terrifying force was still unfinished, and the flower pot slammed into the driver. For a time, the armed helicopter was completely out of control, spinning like a headless fly in the air in an instant, as if dancing. When the propeller completely lost its power, the whole body instantly fell from a height of hundreds of meters. Boom! The knocking on the door completely stopped. Seemingly aware of his companion's misfortune, there was an angry voice, "Break open the door for me." Bang! Before they smashed open the entire gate first, a figure knocked out from the inside. Not only was the heavy metal gate broken by him, but the two soldiers behind him were crushed by himself. "I heard that you are looking for me? What a good day today, so many people are looking for me in a rush." Su Chen's words floated in the air. Although the words were plain, everyone still felt a sullen anger hidden in them. "Su Chen, that's you? I think you should explain your identity and origin." In the hall outside, a soldier shouted. At the same time, there was the sound of guns being loaded one after another. Su Chen smiled. "Okay, then you go to King Yama and ask me who I am? What's the meaning? Just send you to hell, idiots." The words just fell. Su Chen's figure disappeared in place. Day. At the same time, the sound of gunshots continued to sound like raindrops. But the figure in front of him was really too fast, like a phantom, constantly attacking, leaving behind afterimages that could not be distinguished from true and false. Every afterimage passed by, all of which were thrown out by the soldiers' bodies, and the people on the scene couldn't believe that such a terrifying effect of artillery shells was fired under an empty fist. "Where is this person? Yeah, he's not human at all." An unbelievable voice suddenly came. The soldier who was hit by the shot was stunned. Only then did he realize that this sturdy figure, like a marble sculpture, ignored any bullet impact, and the power of the bullet only penetrated the white coat outside him. "Damn, call the Fantastic Four up." In the corridor, Su Chen looked down at his bullet-damaged shirt and couldn't help frowning. This was Diana's own choice. Congratulations, one more crime. 35. The sound of fighting suddenly continued to be heard in the entire blocked building. The Fantastic Four, who were originally on standby on the lower floor, did not dare to stay, and hurriedly headed upstairs. Only the elevator was called by a famous soldier, and they had to go up from the stairway. General Ross glanced at the confidant beside him. "You go too, the other party is not a good stubborn, so don't keep your hands." Bronsky laughed cruelly. "He only needs to worry that he can resist like the Hulk." In an instant, the combat units on standby below all headed towards the top floor. There are few soldiers left at the top for the first time. Bang! Su Chen flew out with a simple straight fist, and a figure in front of him crashed directly into the wall, several feet deep, and the cracks in the wall were instantly mixed with cross-flowing red blood. Beep 567. At this time, there was a sound from an elevator on the right, and it was the figure below reaching the top from above. Su Chen even looked at what was inside, her eyes flushed red, and a hot line of sight shot straight out. The high heat temperature on the surface of the sun was like a knife stuck in a cake. Without a trace of obstruction, the metal door of the elevator was directly blown. The power is not only that, the terrifying heat vision penetrated through several walls in an instant, breaking through the wall, and a red beam of red light can be seen flying out in the air outside. Naturally, there was no ambiguity in the soldiers hiding in the elevator, and they were completely cut off by the heat line of sight, and a pungent roasting smell was faintly heard in the air. Beep. There was another sound of an elevator arriving. Su Chen's face was expressionless, and his hot eyes were not yet red, and he flew directly towards the other elevator, just like the method, very smoothly piercing the people inside. But after a while, Su Chen frowned. In the elevator, which was supposed to be silent, there was a roar of a beast. Click! In an instant, a huge figure smashed the entire elevator door frame, and roared at Su Chen with open teeth and claws. Bug, you've completely angered me, the monster named Abomination shouted. Episode 52. Hate Attack. Roar. A roaring roar burst out from the monster in front of him. The body that is more than 4 meters tall is like a crouching behemoth, the whole body almost burst the ceiling, and what is even more terrifying is that the gray skin of the body seems to be festering, full of rotten smell, not to mention, bone spurs shot out of the back of the spine. The face is extremely ugly, this is hatred, a monster that is enough to rival the Hulk for a while. Browns is basically a soldier. In order to hunt down the Hulk banner, he successfully passed the super serum and became a super soldier. Not only that, he also successfully absorbed gamma particles, so that he achieved the name of Abomination. Now, he followed General Ross to the north and south, just to challenge the strong. It's you, the little reptile. Abomination grinned, and the giant claws in one hand approached him. Pu Fan's big claws fluttered in the air, and the figure that was originally on the spot jumped for a while, but it was instantly suspended in mid-air, and an indifferent word floated. I hate people looking at me from a bird's eye view. So what? Hatred snapped. So, you'd better just lie down. 35. There was a roar whistling in the air again. Su Chen in mid-air dodged lightly, dodging the giant hand that came in the air again, then he raised his fist, and disappeared in the air with a bang in the next second. Middle. Boom. A heavy fist slammed down on the hated head. Su Chen's fist released the enormous force as endless as the ocean. He hated that the ground under his feet couldn't bear the force, and it shattered and shattered with a click. Even the marble-doped concrete floors below were suddenly smashed into pieces. Su Chen drove his body and punched him, knocking his hatred from the top floor all the way to the middle of the floor before it stopped abruptly. The smoke and dust from the sky lifted up, and a deep pit appeared on the shattered floor, and the huge body of disgust was lying down. Ow! After a heart-piercing beast roar, Hate once again grabbed the air with one hand, only to grab the air again. He suddenly struggled to stand up from the deep pit, shook his slightly dazed head, and quickly rammed towards the figure in front of him. The sound of the surrounding wind suddenly roared, and every step of disgust fell, leaving huge pits on the ground, and all of a sudden it was like a train running at full speed. Su Chen, who was suspended in the air, was covered by a black battle suit, and his black cloak swayed with the wind blowing. Facing the impact of this monster, he was suspended in the air without fear at all. He raised his hands and suddenly held up the Howran impact in front of him. The terrifying force rushed like a wave, but Su Chen took it all in. The body did not retreat half an inch, but stopped the offensive in front of him. I said it all, let you lie down. Didn't you hear? After a contemptuous word, Su Chen firmly grasped the Abomination's arm, the huge body like a small mountain bag seemed to be light in his hand, and he was thrown to the ground with a bang. Bang! The ground couldn't bear the crash again. The 2 floors of the building were completely smashed, and the embarrassed body lay down again under the building, and did not stand up for several seconds. The soldiers who had been following around didn't dare to take a step at all. Seeing that Abomination was beaten so helplessly, they felt chills in their hearts. Even the Hulk, who treated the city as a playground, Abomination was not beaten so badly. Pass. What kind of monster is this man? Damn. Hatred has a certain sanity, but the successive setbacks made the anger in his heart burst into flames and explosions. Like the Hulk, he also possesses an extremely terrifying resilience. After a few seconds, he struggled to stand up from the ground, his fierce claws were wide open, and his eyes the size of copper bells were wide open, full of grief and anger. He looked at the figure floating in front of him. Impossible, how can your power? So terrifying. The hatred growled in a low voice. This is once again he experienced the feeling of being regarded as an ant bug. And the last time, when he was just a super soldier facing the Hulk, that time, he fully felt the huge power gap and his own weakness. But that feeling disappeared completely after he became hatred. Even if he narrowly lost to the Hulk, he did not feel such a big power gap. But this time, he once again experienced the feeling of weakness and powerlessness. Impossible. What the hell are you? Abomination unimaginably punched again, and the oncoming one was also a fist. The disproportionately colliding fists brought a great sense of shock. Bang! As always, the body of Hatred was knocked out in the collision again. Do not. The Hatred couldn't forgive himself for his weakness, and he rammed away without saying a word. But in less than an instant, Su Chen's body of steel was directly knocked out, and the fierce Hatred refused to admit defeat. The fist raised on the opposite side smashed down again with a shameless hammer. Bang! It came quickly, and it went quickly. The body of Disgust directly smashed several floors and crashed to the bottom of the ground, and this floor was already the bottom floor of the entire building. From the top floor of the building, I crashed all the way into the basement at the bottom. Hatred only felt grief and anger, and only felt that the internal organs were dislocated and moved, and the spine on the back was broken. The right hand that had collided several times was still numb, and the severe pain reminded him that all the shocks just now were ridiculous. Why, you are not human, why can you be so strong? He cursed in disgust, and a mouthful of blood spurted out. The figure suspended in midair just looked at him indifferently. A pair of black and white clear eyes looked down at the Hatred below, like a king looking down at his defeated generals, making Hatred feel more and more uncomfortable. Li Wangzhao. Weak, really too weak. It seemed that he could not bear to be insulted, and hated to roar again to launch an attack. But in the next second, Su Chen's indifferent eyes flashed red. Call out. A red light pierced the sky, and the surrounding temperature rose for a while, and the hot line of sight instantly penetrated the body of hate, and a huge mouth suddenly cracked at the waist. The concrete floor was just like tofu, and it was instantly penetrated by this red light. Immediately left a gap of nearly tens of meters deep in the ground. Age. Abomination suffered a heavy blow, and suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood, and finally was unable to hold on. His eyes closed slowly, and collapsed on the ground with a bang. And the surrounding at the moment did not lift the encirclement, but gradually approached. But after a while, the figure of the old opponent appeared again. Episode 53. Weak smelly fish and rotten shrimp. Why, you stinky fish and rotten shrimp are trying to stop me? In the closed space of the underground parking lot, Su Chen's words came out. Soon, in the underground parking lot, several familiar figures suddenly appeared. 3 men and 1 woman were the Fantastic Four who had a fight. At the moment, they were dressed in blue and white costumes with the Fantastic Four logo, and looked at Su Chen in the field with solemn expressions. They must have never thought that the Hatred known for their brute force would be defeated so badly by his hands. Who the hell are you? Reed said with great fear. A person with a fascination with such a terrifying power is definitely a potentially huge threat in society. Under the dark of night, the buildings in Manhattan City had a series of collisions, which naturally attracted the attention of many people. Definitely, the whole building has been completely blocked by General Ross men, so don't expect anyone to come near. Thinking of General Zod who had come quietly, Su Chen laughed inexplicably, and then Reed's words laughed, it doesn't matter who I am, and you will soon know who I am. To this extent, it seems that our grievances can't be cut off at all. Reed said through gritted teeth. Is it just because of the 4 of you who are defeated? Su Chen laughed nonchalantly. You think you're just lawless? Thunderbolt Johnny, who was burning with a torch in front of him, said with great dissatisfaction. He was arrogant, and he valued winning and losing more. He couldn't hold back the anger in his heart. Lawless, I'm sorry, I am really lawless to you guys. Su Chen said. Simply arrogant. 99. There was a roar of scolding from the opposite camp. Turn on the power for me and control him. General Ross, who had been remote control, issued his order directly at this moment. In an instant, a machine like a radar was pushed into the basement. For a long period of time, General Ross did not hate the Hulk to help out. The reason why the Hulk was so embarrassed was that he relied on the army weapons in his hands. Lawless? Then give me a taste of the power of these weapons. In an instant, the radar machine burst out a terrifying howl, like sound waves impacting Su Chen's body from all around. All of a sudden, there was a lot of noise in his ears, the magic sound filled his ears, and his mind kept buzzing. The strong sound waves even seemed to solidify the air around Su Chen, making it a little difficult for him to walk. No wonder this is the weapon that imprisoned the Hulk. Banner suffered a lot, and General Ross was even more ruthless, and directly launched several Su Chen, which surrounded the center from all sides. Is this the baby you're relying on? Su Chen moved his feet, only feeling that he was moving his body under the suppression of hundreds of times the gravity field, and even the suspended body was suppressed on the ground. But apart from this and the constant buzzing in his ears, the entire sonic weapon is nothing more than that. Su Chen's eyes were suddenly cold, and his body was still as straight as a sword. At this moment, the trillions of cells in his body were like a furnace, constantly absorbing the air energy from the outside world. Increase. Bang. Suddenly, there was a violent pulse beat, which was Su Chen's sudden heartbeat when his strength rose strongly, and this sound could not even be concealed by the noisy sound waves around. This intense confinement field could not hold Su Chen even half a point. Under the dull eyes of everyone, the figure that fell on the ground instantly floated up again, the black cloak was constantly being blown by the wind, and a cold smile appeared on Su Chen's face. That's it? But it's still too noisy. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure jumped out of this imprisoned place in an instant, and the radar machine nearly 100 meters away exploded in an instant. He flew around in an instant, smashing the surrounding radar machines one after another. Boom. For a while, brilliant orange-red fireworks burst into flames. Arrogant. At this time, a line of fire came flying, but it was Johnny, who had already been unable to hold back his heart. The flames around him seemed to fuel his madness, as if a well-burning meteor collided directly. Su Chen was not afraid at all, his body didn't move, and his hand grabbed straight ahead, but Johnny obviously didn't want to collide face to face, but he deflected from his side, and then kept spinning around Su Chen's body. Boom. The flames instantly surrounded Su Chen from all directions, and the burning radar machine seemed to fuel the power of Johnny's flames. In an instant, the entire temperature suddenly climbed to a terrifying level. Supernova. The stone man suddenly shouted. According to Johnny, the supernova is his own nirvana. By constantly revolving around the opponent, he creates a terrifying high-temperature cage. What is even more frightening is that the rotating high temperature has reached a temperature close to the surface of the sun, not only putting a lot of pressure on Johnny himself, but also the people surrounded by it are difficult to survive. Su Chen, who was deeply immersed in it, showed no fear, and his skin suddenly became very dry, which was a sign of evaporated water, but in just a few seconds, the cells began to frantically absorb the high-temperature energy from the outside world, and the whole body become more and more suitable for living in such a high-temperature environment. Darwin's evolution, in just a few seconds, the original dry skin was instantly filled with vitality. This is the terrifying ability to adapt to your harsh environment as the king of Kryptonians. A hand stretched out, one passed through the wave of flames, and precisely grabbed Johnny's neck. Immediately, the speed of rotation dropped, and the temperature of the fireworks around was still very high, but this was helpless for Su Chen after his physique was transformed. The flames tried to erode his arm, Su Chen frowned, grabbed Johnny firmly, and fell to the ground so violently. Boom. In an instant, a crater like a meteorite fell in the earth, and a crack in the earth spread to a small part of the underground parking lot, and the body that was like a torch just now extinguished the fireworks, and the flame cages around it collapsed. The violently steaming white mist showed the terrifying high temperature just now. He narrowed his eyes, raised his fist again, and slammed into the figure on the ground, but a figure took the punch head-on. Like the tall figure on the marble surface, it is the stone man. Taking this punch, he also suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood, and the stone man who was struggling to support barely stood, just so as not to fall down on Johnny's body. It is difficult to hold a punch, what is it that is not weak? Righteousness. Episode 54. The Heroic Hammer. In an instant, the two lost their combat effectiveness one after another, which caught Reed and Susan a little off guard. Facing the stone man who was still struggling, Su Chen raised his fist again, but a huge psychokinesis filled his arms, making him unable to move. Reed even stretched out his rubber body, like a wave swept in. You forgot what happened to you last time. Your weakness is too obvious. After Su Chen finished speaking, a red light appeared in his eyes. Call out. The heat sight beam was fleeting, and Reed was shocked. His body was folded like an origami in an instant, and he narrowly missed the beam, but he could not hide for a while. The air in front of him hadn't dissipated all the heat, but it suddenly cooled down. It turned out that Su Chen spit out an air of frost. The ground around him froze instantly, and no matter how flexible Reed's rubber body was to avoid it, he couldn't resist the freezing attack involving the surrounding environment. In the blink of an eye, half of his body was completely frozen. The malicious attack of ice energy not only made his body unable to move, but also instantly inactivated his rubber physique. Under the low temperature, he was paralyzed and weak, stuck to the ground at a loss. Reed. Susan called again. You'd better take care of yourself. Su Chen's fist was hard for a while, and the psychokinesis imprisoned in his arm was torn apart by him in an instant, and then he grabbed the stone man and threw it forward. Susan gritted her teeth and suddenly pushed her psychokinesis barrier to support it in front of her. The stone man was unable to break the air barrier under the impact. Su Chen sneered, and his body flew out like a sharp arrow. Bang! The barrier shattered instantly. Susan's body was like a puppet, and it slammed into the wall behind. This time, the offensive of the Fantastic Four fell apart, and they once again repeated the history of the last time and were vulnerable. The trembling soldiers on the field had already felt chills and fled here quietly. After all, they were not facing a monster capable of freezing winter. These soldiers are more willing to face the Hulk than to face this fierce guy with an empty fist. It's just that they want to escape and hide their figure. How could Su Chen let go of it? In his field of vision, the location of these guys hiding is undoubtedly exposed to his perception. Even if the structure of the entire building is very complicated, they cannot leave without a trace. Only. The surrounding lights were originally bright and dim, but after a moment, they were completely extinguished, and the entire parking lot was plunged into darkness that could not be seen. Only some small fireworks scattered on the ground showed a faint brightness. Power cut? But, not just the building where Su Chen is located, the entire New York City began to lose power on a large scale. In the blink of an eye, a steel city full of lights was instantly turned off, and the entire New York City fell into darkness. Under the darkness of the night, there was a sound of people panicking in an instant. This panic, by no means coincidentally, was rapidly spreading from New York to the entire eastern seaboard. The power outages continued to spread, and in the blink of an eye, the entire country lost power. It's like an invisible big hand lightly turned off the electric switch of the Earth, and in an instant, the Earth was officially plunged into darkness. This is the ending that human beings have never faced since entering the electrical age. How is this going? Oh my God, why is there a blackout in New York? No, it's the entire Western Sea area. No, the whole world has lost power. People's panicked screams instantly haunted the entire city. Many key departments who had already been notified in advance were even more afraid. They didn't expect that this unknown alien had not officially met, so they would have such a play. Damn, what the hell is going on? To say who is the angriest in the whole of New York is Justin Hammer on the stage of the Stark International Fair. Tonight was the time for him to play to the fullest, especially when he released his new product on the Stark stage in public. Yes, that is Tony Stark's proud steel robot. In Hammer's vision, this was the perfect face slap scene, and he had already thought about Tony's disappointment. Unexpectedly, all these assumptions were completely interrupted by a power outage. What about a face slapping? What about the despair? All can't be seen. Isn't this living up to the audience's expectations? Just as he was venting his irritable temper, an officer from the military walked up to him and told him some unknown secrets. Global blackout? How is this possible? The news is right, Mr. Hammer, except for some special departments that are still running. The whole country is almost paralyzed, so now the country needs to recruit your strength. Alien? Hammer was at a loss. But soon. After a global blackout, the battleship aliens from Krypton finally called roar. Sizzle. It seems that the electric switch has loosened, and the TV screen, radio, and radio all sounded the sound of electric current. He's scheduling the channel. The SHIELD technician knew immediately. Soon, another voice came from all over the communication, "You humans are not alone." It was an English sentence, but soon, the short phrase "You humans are not alone" was translated into languages all over the world and repeated. SHIELD, who had been following closely, suddenly turned pale. These aliens quickly mastered the languages around the world through technology. I'm General Zod, from a faraway world. I came here through the ghost area. Just because you hid someone from our planet, I ask you to return this person and take over by myself. He looks just like you, but he's not one of you. Who knows where he is? The future of the planet is in your hands. Let him surrender to me before dawn. 5. After saying these words, Zod's voice disappeared without a trace. At this time, the power of each city began to be restored, and the Earth regained its light, but no one was excited and happy, and the domineering declaration of the alien 5.7 people still echoed in their minds. I don't think I need to explain more. The aliens have declared war. The military official said with a wry smile. Justin Hammer on the side was stunned for a while, but suddenly he shouted, "This is really an opportunity given to me by God." Originally, I was thinking about how to use a steel robot to slap Tony's face. Now that I think about it, it's so narrow-minded. I decided to use the steel robots produced by our Hammer group to fight these invading aliens. Hammer looked at the dense steel machine behind him and couldn't help but let out a sneer. A godsend, he is no longer satisfied with appearing at the Stark Expo, he wants to sell his products to the whole Earth. Opportunities start from destroying aliens. We, the Hammer group, took over this job. Hammer said proudly. Episode 55. Sue someone who is not worth mentioning. The declaration of the Kryptonian General Zod caused a great uproar in the whole world. This is not a joke or a prank, Brazil. As long as people look up, they can see a popular flight object from the bottom of the night, revolving around the Earth in flight. The leading level of alien technology makes people feel hopeless. If it is fortunate, it is that this group of Kryptonians seems to be looking for only one person. Looking for someone? Who is that person? No one knows. The Fantastic Four are looking for someone? How come they are looking for someone? Director Nick Fury shouted angrily inside the aircraft carrier where SHIELD belonged. Why can't I contact the Fantastic Four and General Ross? What's the matter with the two of them? Detective Phil Coulson at one end looked a little embarrassed and could only say angrily, it is said that before this, both of them received orders from President Jensen to arrest a mutant with a mysterious origin, so that we have not been able to contact them. 5. Damn. Director Nick scolded, but he didn't know whether to scold the president or the guy on the mission. What about mutant? Did they respond? Mutant? 35. Definitely the Xavier Academy that Charles belongs to. Can I still count on Magneto to help us? Phil Coulson wiped the cold sweat from his face, and Deputy Director Hill, who was on the side, took over the conversation and said, Charles didn't respond, so that's all we have to call. In the conference room in front of me, there are figures of different men and women, that is, the original plan of the so-called Avengers plan. You know that I pushed the exposition, you are sure that you can face that alien warship with us? Tony Stark said while enjoying a small drink. I don't think you should drink before a fight, Steve said seriously. Before the possible doomsday, I think this is the last drink. Facing the captain's questioning, Tony smiled very freely. After hearing the words, a gentle guy on the side also took a sip of wine. He was full of a bookish air, like a university professor, but it was difficult for people to imagine that this guy was the incarnation of the Hulk. Not long ago, Banner was successfully persuaded by Black Widow Natasha Romanoff to come to S.H.I.E.L.D. However, he did not expect a disaster to come so quietly. I think the Avengers haven't been formed for a day, I'm afraid we'll have to die. Tony drank and spit out speechlessly. Please, don't say these unlucky words. Jane Foster couldn't help but reply, as an astronomer she has been studying the trajectory of the Krypton battleship, at the moment is complaining that they disturb to his work. Hey girl, I advise you to drop your job, if you really care about the safety of the planet, you can just call your little boyfriend over and don't have to do other work at all, Tony said. These remarks were very bitter, but unexpectedly, they did not attract everyone's scolding and abuse. After all, everyone knows that Jane Foster is closely associated with a prince from Asgard, the son of Odin written in the epic, and with his help, the current problem will obviously be solved. Even Jane Foster smiled bitterly, she didn't want to. But, I really don't have his contact information. The two of them haven't seen each other since the New Mexico town parted. Roar. Hearing this, many people sighed heavily. The laughter just now stopped. It is conceivable how much pressure the Kryptonians brought them. From the floor-to-ceiling windows of the aircraft carrier of Shushu Pyakong flight, you can clearly see an alien warship passing obliquely in the distance flying towards the horizon. The entire Kryptonian warship is patrolling the Earth, and the technicians speculate that it is collecting all the information of the Earth. Orientation information. This kind of aggrieved look is like human beings have completely become prisoners of Kryptonian battleships. Damn. Launch an attack? Directly test the opponent's bottom line? No one knows what to do next, and no one knows who the Kryptonian warship is looking for? Everyone will attack rashly, but according to the order given by President Jensen of Air Force One, the nuclear bomb will be launched at the moment of dawn. Attack. And at the moment of dawn, it was also the deadline set by the Kryptonians for human beings. No matter whether that person appeared or not, everyone was prepared for the worst. Nuclear bomb? Damn, is it really the end? Not necessarily. If it happens to be detonated on the high-altitude trajectory of an alien warship, it will not have much impact on human beings. 39. But in any case, human beings have not opened this Pandora's box for a long time. The mood was still heavy, and everyone tried their best to come up with a solution. At this time, a bell rang, and Phil Coulson looked embarrassedly at the caller ID. It's General Ross, and they finally gave an answer. 99. He didn't have time to sigh in relief, but the content of the call was shocking and he trembled uncomfortably. What? Wait a minute, General Ross, you've been attacked. All of a sudden, a pair of eyes in the conference room looked over. Phil Coulson wanted to say something else, but he suddenly hung up the phone, and the blind voice of Dripping sounded. Seeing everyone's doubtful eyes, Phil Coulson smiled wryly. Ross asked us for help, which means that they joined the Fantastic Four and couldn't figure out a single person. A mutant? It seems, it should be. I heard that they were the one who arrested Brotherhood, but it seems that they encountered a hard stake. The other party is called Sue. I call him Sue, 567. Nick Fury couldn't hold back his temper and started to get angry. What time is it now? The alien warships are all riding on our faces. Is that Mr. Sue more important than aliens? It's not worth mentioning. Tell them, let yourself get into trouble and deal with it yourself. Don't ask us SHIELD to help you clean up. 99. After the crackling call was finally finished, Phil Coulson agreed with an embarrassed expression. Next, they returned to the question of how to deal with the alien battleship before dawn. Click. The boot smashed a phone, and before General Ross could see the attacker, he was kicked and knocked out, and the attacker was a man named Su Chen. At this time, not long after, a beautiful figure came out of the corridor. It was Diana, who rushed back non-stop. She put down the fruit she bought in her arms and looked at Su Chen, who was safe and sound, inexplicably relieved. It's all right. It's okay, something happened and it's resolved. Su Chen smiled. It's just that Diana didn't care about the sudden attack, but asked worriedly, you heard it too. Are you going? Su Chen nodded heavily. Kryptonians, anyway, need to make a conclusion. Episode 56. Another Kryptonian. Before dawn, human beings have to give an account to the Kryptonians who come from far away. The Kryptonian battleship patrolling in the Earth's orbit is like a tiger that is eyeing a tiger, looking down at the world below, just like looking at the prey in the cage. Panic, uneasy, flustered, all the negative emotions permeated the crowd. Before dawn, the human race began to panic. Fire was burning inexplicably in the city. The sound of fighting came one after another. No one could sleep. After all, no one knew whether they could survive after dawn. The police began to be dispatched, and some anonymous superheroes began to prevent crimes from happening in various alleys. From time to time, X-Men could even be seen. Only in the face of the mass panic, the military force and even the security force of the guards are insufficient, and they can only be supported outside. The higher-level President Jensen, staying in the safest Air Force One plane, gritted his teeth and pondered, and a well-known staff member in the internal meeting thought about a solution that could not be perfect. It's just that everyone looks at the president and feels extremely scared. After all, the president's panic is no more than ordinary people, and he has been holding a button tightly in his hand, which is the button about nuclear facilities. Once the president presses this button, it will be far away on the ground. The underground nuclear facility directly opened Pandora's box, and a nuclear bomb burst out. Many staff members were terrified, for fear that the president would miss a moment and press the button that should not be pressed. In another high-altitude aircraft carrier, director Nick Fury and the Avengers have been negotiating, seizing the battleship, disguising and impersonating. One by one, the words that are not reliable or not are being discussed. The astronomer Jane Foster, who was sitting at the bottom of the table, looked at the starry sky outside in boredom and thought to herself, Thor, have you seen all this? New York, on the balcony of a penthouse. Under the shadowy light of the night, a strong and tall shadow overlapped with a slender shadow. In front of the floor-to-ceiling windows on the balcony, Su Chen hugged Diana tightly. The relationship between the two has become somewhat intriguing since the settlement of Ares. After the accident on Krypton, the relationship between the two inexplicably went a step further. Diana, who was tightly burying her head in Su Chen's arms, said, at that time, you were just a child, didn't it reach my waist? I didn't expect it, just a few years later, you've become so tall. These words are indeed very reasonable. The tall Diana has a figure that top models can't match, but compared to the tall and strong Su Chen, she really looks very petite. Yeah, I've grown up. Su Chen smiled, I've already reached the age where I can take advantage. After Diana heard it, she was silent, but her face was flushed for a long time. On the occasion of the arrival of the Kryptonians, the relationship between the two brothers and sisters who have been together for a long time seems to have undergone a qualitative change, and it has suddenly changed towards a certain relationship, and everything seems to be very natural. Diana sighed, well, can't take your time anymore. Su Chen didn't say much, just lowered his head and kissed her forehead. Diana shook her head and smiled, do you need me to go with you? No, I'll face these things alone. 35 Su Chen said gently. Released her arms, Diana spread her hands and slowly adjusted the collar and dress for Su Chen. After a while, she sighed, whether the other party is kind or malicious, you must remember that you must come back alive. 5. That's definitely. The two of them had spent a lot of time chatting and communicating. Diana looked at the still dark night and couldn't help but sigh, go, I'll be here waiting for you to come back. Su Chen nodded, took a deep look at Qian Li's figure in front of her, and instantly tipped her toes, and her whole figure flew through the air. The target location was the Kryptonian battleship that was slowly patrolling flight. When Su Chen didn't know it, the delay was a bit too long, and he was already a step late. Flight's Kryptonian battleship has reduced a lot of flight speed, but an alien figure has stepped into it, and this figure is the guy from General Zod and others. Joel's son is already so old. Inside the battleship, a steady lady's voice fluttered. What about General Zod? The person who boarded the ship in front of him was the Kryptonian who had been raised by the farmer, Clark. Or the more accurate name of the Kryptonian is Carl L. At the moment, Clark looked at the surrounding whole environment, looking at the strange Kryptonians, but Clark did not find General Zod. But before the doubts in his heart were resolved, Clark only felt that his vision was blurred for a while, the aura in his body was very turbulent, his heart was stuffy, and he suddenly spit out a mouthful of blood. No, how is this possible? Clark only felt weak and fell to his knees limply on the ground. The general himself has already gone out to do a major event, so I will give it all the power here. Fiora, the female adjutant of the Krypton fleet, said with a straight face. Then she glanced at Clark, who was slumped to the ground, and couldn't help but say, your body rejects the atmospheric environment here. You have lived on Earth for so many years, and you can no longer adapt to the atmosphere of our Krypton planet. Speaking of which, it is really a little bit. Irony. 5. After Fiora finished speaking, he glanced at the scientist beside him and said, take him as an experiment and see his current physical condition. But right now. There was a startled roar from the cockpit. Commander Fiora found an unknown flight object approaching. Do you have to ask me? Even if all the unknown flight objects are not close to the battleship, once they are within the attack range, they will be shot down by me directly. Fiora said directly and neatly. No, but, Commander Li Wangzhao, our vital signs indicate that a real Kryptonian is approaching. Yes, another Kryptonian is coming our battleship. What? Fiora trembled in shock. Is there a second Kryptonian on this Earth? Looking at Clark, who seemed to be unaware, Fiora was puzzled. She knew that Joel sent an escape capsule to come to Earth, but who was the second person who appeared on Earth inexplicably? But no matter who it was, Fiora didn't lose his mind too much, and said calmly, let him in. 9. Who is this person? The Kryptonians all over the battleship were looking forward to it. When the hatch opened, a strong and tall figure walked into the Kryptonian battleship. Inexplicably, the moment many Kryptonians met in person, they felt a throbbing in their hearts. Episode 57. The coercion from the monarch. When the figure appeared from the hatch, most of the Kryptonians present felt a throbbing in their hearts for no reason. The heartbeat was in a panic, as if he had encountered his natural enemy, a predator at the top of the food chain, or a courtier had encountered his monarch. This inexplicable restlessness swept through the hearts of Kryptonians. This was the impact another Kryptonian had on them when they boarded the ship, a feeling that Clark had never felt before. What about General Zod? A word of fluttering broke the freezing point of the atmosphere here. Su Chen frowned. He didn't find General Zod's figure here. But seeing everyone looking at him like a mountain tiger, Su Chen himself felt very strange. Fiora frowned tightly, and there was an indescribable meaning on her delicate facial features. She looked at Su Chen and said incredulously, impossible, even in the Supreme Council, there is no such thing. Suffocation, who are you? It doesn't matter who I am, you didn't hear what I said just now? Su Chen emphasized it again, and a pair of eyes couldn't help looking at her, and her neat short black hair set off her delicate face with a heroic and sassy temperament. She is also the woman present, and the second highest level deputy commander since General Zod. The atmosphere suddenly became depressed, and everyone swallowed, but a Krypton 567 person stood up and said, General Zod went out alone to find the Krypton reconnaissance ship that sent the signal. I see. Suchin suddenly realized that it should be the case. After all, the reconnaissance ship that sent the signal had an extremely important creation library, and General Zod should have rushed to the reconnaissance ship as soon as he arrived. Before I came, I didn't think about it. But anyway, I'll wait here for General Zod. Thinking about it again, General Zod will drive it back even if he activates the reconnaissance ship. And the Kryptonian battleship under the foot, called the World Engine, is much larger than its Yutsu reconnaissance ship and can be easily accommodated. The relaxed and natural attitude of the man in front of him made many Kryptonians feel very uncomfortable. Soon, they discovered a key problem. Impossible, your body can adapt to the atmospheric environment here? Logically, you should be like Carl L., you are so sick that you fall down. Carl L.? Only then did Su Chen realize who this person's name was. It turned out to be Clark's Kryptonian name. He thought that this guy had already boarded the battleship in the time he wasted. It turns out he's here too. 99. Moreover, why do I reject the environment here? Speaking of which, it's just some discomfort. Su Chen shook his arm, feeling the power that was constantly flowing back inside. The moment he stepped into the ship, the Kryptonian atmosphere here did make Su Chen a little uncomfortable for the first time, but he would not lose his strength like Clark and vomit blood and lie down. After all, it's just discomfort. But after a while, the slightly tired body cell activity quickly adapted to the unfamiliar atmospheric environment here, and Roar began to recover happily. Taking the high-temperature environment created by Human Torch just now, Su Chen can also quickly adapt to it. This is the biggest mystery of Su Chen's body. The terrifying cell adaptation ability is enough for him to adapt to various harsh environments and do whatever he wants. Looking at Su Chen, who was still standing, the expressions of the Kryptonians became a little ugly. Even Fiora, the deputy commander who started to call the shots, wondered if he had let in a beast. Impossible. It's impossible, Kryptonians have never had this kind of constitution. A Kryptonian scientist said hysterically, your body has already adapted to the Earth's sun, and it is impossible not to reject the people here. The environment is right, and Krypton's gene pool should not have such samples. 5. The scientist seemed to encounter an unsolvable problem and paced back and forth inexplicably, as if going crazy. The Kryptonians present were even more tense. They knew that an unidentified guy had been put in. It stands to reason that all Kryptonians died in that catastrophe. Fiora frowned and thought for a while, DBFH, who are you? How could you come to Earth? After thinking for a while, she said firmly, I'm sorry, even if you are a rare fellow Kryptonian, we can't let go of an unidentified Kryptonian. 35. As soon as the words fell, some Kryptonian warriors could not help but slowly approached his surroundings, but these people had a hint of hesitation on their faces, and their hearts were even more uneasy, because the moment Su Chen appeared, a sense of unease lingered all the time. Never dispersed. You sure? Su Chen looked at the woman who gave the order in front of her. Looking at such a pair of cold eyes, Fiora's face as frosty as a lake could not help but move, and a trace of fear appeared in the deep eyes, and this inexplicable emotion arose out of nowhere. She was speechless for a moment. However, these Kryptonian warriors have gradually overcome their fears and tried to approach Su Chen, who is in the middle. There was a hint of tearing air sounds in his ears. Su Chen shook his head, speaking of which, you guys are really outrageous. He tilted his head and avoided a fist that came from his back. At the same time, he grabbed his arm smoothly with his left hand, and with a violent force, threw the figure behind him and slammed into the battleship. On the deck. That blunt force has caused the alloy deck to burst open several cracks. The figure of Krypton lying on the ground nearly fainted. Su Chen glanced at it and shook his head, weak. Definitely, he also knew that the Kryptonians with steel bodies and extraordinary strength did not refer to all Kryptonians in general. Even in the battleship in front of him, there were many Kryptonians who attacked with guns in their hands and possessed that unparalleled extraordinary power. Obviously, they were the Kryptonians in black battle armor who had not yet moved in front of them. For example, the Deputy Commander Fiora in front of him, and several sturdy figures under the black armor around him. Just as the conflict spreads further. Suddenly, the scientist who had been thinking hard and pacing suddenly screamed. If there are really samples that don't exist in the gene pool and the viability of cells that can quickly adapt to a variety of environments, then that means they succeeded. Damn, they really success, the savior plan actually succeeded. The scientist cried out madly. When it came to excitement, his face was full of excitement. He finally understood what the throbbing from beginning to end was all about. It was the breath of the future leader of Krypton, the pressure from the monarch of Krypton. Pissed. Suddenly, the scientist spat out a mouthful of blood, and an arm passed through his body behind him, penetrating his body. Bullshit, disturbing the morale of the army, damn it. The sturdy figure in black armor squeezed his heart directly with one hand. Episode 58. Fighting. Cough cough. A large cloud of blood was continuously sprayed from the mouth of the Kryptonian scientist. He lowered his head and bowed his head, only to see an arm passing through his body, and it was his broken heart in his hand. In an instant, his eyes darkened and he completely lost consciousness. The sturdy figure in black armor slammed the corpse into the air, and a pair of vigilant eyes looked at the Kryptonians around him. This man disturbs the military's morale, die in his right place. The Kryptonians who were glanced by were silent, deeply aware that the scientist seemed to have said something incredible, so much so that they were silenced. The Messianic plan? A key word reverberated in their minds. What does it mean? But under the power of the Force, no one said much a word against it. It's just that Fiora's face became a little moved, and her eyes flashed at Suchin, but she didn't know what she was thinking. However, the burly Kryptonian nodded with satisfaction just now, and then he couldn't help but stare at Suchin with a pair of vicious eyes. A kid like you who came out of nowhere, please accept our review. Just finished. One after another Kryptonian figures stood up, uniformed in black armor, and the cold metallic luster continued to bloom from it. This was the standard Kryptonian warrior. Different from the Kryptonians holding high-tech guns on the field, these Kryptonian warriors have empty fists, but they are hundreds of times more powerful than weapons. They are super warriors who have been genetically modified under the sun of Krypton, and they have the terrifying power of cannonballs under their fists. Take him. Did not continue to say more. There were two figures rushing towards him, and there was a gust of wind behind him. Surrounded by Kryptonian warriors, Suchin suddenly fell into a heavy siege. From the front was a fierce fist rushing in, and the fierce wind slapped on the face. Suchin squinted his eyes, and slammed away with a fist without showing weakness. Bang! Don't knock the oncoming figure out of the way. Instead of chasing after the victory, Suchin turned his body slightly to one side, avoiding the fists coming from the side, and inexplicably exerted a huge force on his back, and a Kryptonian warrior hugged him tightly. Bang! The elbows of both hands kept slamming back like a city drum, and the muffled crashing sound like thunder kept ringing. Suchin tried to let him untie, but the Kryptonian warrior behind him would rather have his head smashed and stab his injuries, and he would also like to smash his head. To put Suchin on death row. Even in less than a second, the Kryptonian warriors on both sides of the body had already attacked. How stupid. Call out. A red beam of light flew out from his eyes instantly, the temperature in the air instantly soared, and the figures on both sides of the body were instantly swept by the beam, and the figures could not help but fly out. The heat line of sight beam is like a supreme sword that runs through this place, and the steel plates of the battleship that were accidentally affected are all cut by direct cuts without any hindrance. Before the red light from his eyes dissipated, Suchin grabbed the figure on the back and threw it on his shoulders, hitting the ground. Bang! The impact of the impact created a huge amount of crater, and the alloy deck couldn't even withstand this fierce impact. For a while, the offensive from the Kryptonian group attack was lifted. It's just that the Kryptonian warrior who just took a punch just shook his numb neck and looked at Suchin intently. Not bad. Suchin praised sincerely. There are not many people in this world who can take a punch from him without being hurt. Even the stone man can't stand firm with a punch, but imagine how powerful the Kryptonian warriors are. Come on together, watch out for his eyes. A Kryptonian warrior looked at his damaged armor with lingering fears. Accompanied by a roar. A group of Kryptonian warriors rallied again and rushed over. Suchin has never been a passive counterattack person. He smiled softly, stepped on his toes, and his figure was like a flying thunderbolt, directly hitting a figure in front of him. Under the collision, the two figures directly smashed the steel plate wall behind them, and the frustrated Kryptonian warrior jumped directly from the ground, punching fist to fist. Both are the same style, that is the collision of pure physical force. Drink. Suchin roared, strength brewing in his arm. His right fist hit the opposite fist directly like a hammer. Bang. The Kryptonian warrior stepped back dozens of steps in a row, bleeding from the corners of his mouth. His palm armor was completely torn, and the right arm that hit it hung down weakly, obviously broken. The Kryptonian warriors around didn't sit still, but collided directly, and a figure in the distance would jump directly into Su Chen's line of sight. Su Chen didn't even think about it, the incomparable brute force poured directly onto his body. Bang! With another punch, the Kryptonian warrior in front of him was thrown straight out, and the armor on his body was shattered like a broken puppet. When a figure couldn't be distracted by this fight, it suddenly hugged him, and together with Su Chen, it flew dozens of meters away. All the way from the entrance of the battleship, it smashed into several indestructible alloy walls, and collided with it all the way. On a turbo-like engine. ZZ. The fire exploded in an instant, the power was instantly destroyed in one place, and the entire battleship shook inexplicably, and it took a while to restore stability. Before he could break free from this lifeless Kryptonian warrior, another strong wind hit his side, and someone twisted a broken steel plate and flew over. When Su Chen's face was grim, it was another hot sight beam. Fly out. The figure in midair never expected it to come out again. There was no way to avoid it. The red-hot sight beam instantly pierced through his right arm, and went straight through the entire battleship, breaking out of the air. The broken arm fell, and the steel plate in his hand fell heavily on the ground. Su Chen's heart was ruthless, and he directly grabbed the Kryptonian warrior who was hugging him by the waist. Call out. Face to face, the heat sight beam directly penetrated the head of the Kryptonian warrior below. Ding! The communication sound of the battleship suddenly sounded. The SP-1349 reconnaissance ship is approaching the world engine, please open the hatch. At this time, hearing this communication, the surrounding Kryptonian warriors all showed a happy expression. The reconnaissance ship was obviously the one in the North Pole of the Earth. General Zod went to the North Pole to drive it back immediately. After all, there was an extremely important creation library inside. In other words, the driver in the reconnaissance ship is the General Zod who went out on a trip. And he is back. Don't think about running, your death is not far away. 99. Episode 59. Gorgeous Betrayal. The sound of the world engine's hatch opening came involuntarily. The Kryptonian reconnaissance ship far away in the North Pole successfully landed on this engine number. At the same time, a siren sounded from inside the ship. Ding! The atmosphere is leaking, the outside air is invading, and the leak is being blocked. But it was Su Chen's unbridled thermal sight beam just now, which directly damaged the battleship's body, causing the Earth's air to continue to pour in. A man wearing a black cloak and black armor walked down from the reconnaissance ship. His resolute face was full of ruthlessness. It was General Zod, and at the moment he was very dissatisfied. What's going on? How could the battleship be damaged and attacked? General Zod glanced at Deputy Commander Fiora. I saw Fiora with a preoccupied look, standing on the side with a stubborn soul. Looking at the serious damage to the cabin inside, Zod couldn't help but shouted 567 angrily, what the hell is going on? Fiora also regained her senses in an instant, but there was no emotional fluctuation on her frosty face. Feeling the violent movement inside, she couldn't help but look over. Bang! A violent explosion sounded suddenly. A figure of a Kryptonian warrior, like a tattered sandbag, was thrown out of it and fell directly at the feet of General Zod. At the same time, one after another silhouettes filed out. It was the Kryptonian warriors who had been sieging and suppressing. General Zod's pupils turned cold in an instant, his confidants and subordinates were covered with bruises all over. Who are you? Looking at the unfamiliar figure walking slowly from the corridor, Zod's heart throbbed inexplicably. Another Kryptonian on Earth. Fiora said directly, if I'm not wrong, he is the savior of Krypton who is desperate, and the plan of the Supreme Council has really succeeded. Savior? General Zod opened his long-cherished memory, the Savior Project, which was the final plan launched by the Supreme Council at the end of Krypton, to create a perfect and strongest person on Krypton, and will revive the mission of Krypton. Engraved in the genes. If you say that you are a born general, then the Savior is born a born ruler, which is to concentrate the power of the members of the Supreme Council on one person. Savior? Did it really work? General Zod was a little nostalgic, and seemed to be recalling scenes from the past. Yes, it was successful. The flying voice came from the mouth of the tall figure walking in front of him. You are willing to call me Roar the Savior, or the Ruler, the Emperor, anything that shows respect can be called Roar. All in all, I just want to tell you that now I am the owner of this world engine. Everything here is my property, including you guys. And I am very grateful to General Zod for sending the reconnaissance ship back for me. The figure that came out of the black shadow finally showed his true face, tall and strong body, handsome face, every edge and corner was perfect to the extreme, like a work of art in the hands of the greatest sculptor. Does every Kryptonian have to admit that this is indeed the most perfect product created by Krypton? But those arrogant words made many Kryptonian warriors cry out in anger. General Zod, even if he is really the savior of the world, we can't just give up everything in front of us. You forget how the High Council treats us. All the troops we belonged to were expelled to the Dark Ghost area, the Supreme Council. So many of our compatriots died, how many troops were lost, and how many of our families and wives were separated. So, General Zod still needs hesitation? In front of him is the incarnation of the Supreme Council. He wants to tell us to forget all the misery we have encountered, let us obediently bind our hands to him and obey his enslavement. The Kryptonian warriors roared. There are many people who agree with this point of view, and many Kryptonians are clamoring for it. It is obvious that the Supreme Council's behavior of banishing them has made them deeply imprinted in their minds. Many Kryptonians who were restrained also looked at General Zod, who was present. On the one hand, he was the savior created by the Supreme Council, but on the other hand, he was brothers who shared the same hatred and died together. Every Kryptonian on the battleship hated the punishment of the Kryptonian Supreme Council, which was an unforgivable crime. But that is already an old thing after all. Now that Krypton has perished, and the future is a difficult road to revival, it seems that handing over to the real savior is a good choice. Everything was handed over to General Zod to make a choice. Suchin quietly looked at everything around him. He didn't need to think too much. He already understood the root cause of all this. Although he is indeed a sample of the ruler of Krypton, he does have a certain spiritual coercive relationship with the Kryptonians, but don't forget that every Kryptonian is an independent individual with his own ideas. Today, the social order of Krypton has already collapsed, and these Krypton warriors hate the Supreme Council even more, and they are in awe and a little hate for Suchin in front of him. Suchin raised his eyebrows and said bluntly, "On my right hand are those who surrender to me, and those on my left are those who resist me, that is, those who have completely betrayed Krypton. Give you a minute. Make a selection." Point 35. As soon as the words fell, the audience fell silent. A pair of eagerly awaited eyes, many were still looking at General Zod, whose face was uncertain. Definitely, someone has already made a choice soon. Some of the Kryptonians stood directly on Suchin's right hand, and many of them were Kryptonian warriors in battle armor. Obviously, Suchin's identity still played a role to some extent. As time passed by, there were already many Kryptonian warriors standing directly on the left-hand side of the symbol of resistance, and the rest were in a neutral stance, and it was difficult to make a choice in their hearts. Zod just stood there, looking at the figure opposite with a serious face. He still hadn't made a decision. "Forget it, just use me to help you make a decision." At this moment, a soft lady's voice came from 5.7, and there seemed to be a hint of helplessness hidden in the low tone. "Pissed." A sound of blood blooming followed. Zod swallowed a mouthful of blood, and his eyes were filled with unbelievable meaning. It was actually the deputy commander of the battleship Fiora, who attacked and assassinated him behind him. Pierced in the back. There are only two options for everyone to choose from, which is too laborious, and I think it would be much better to have only one option. 35. This is for the future of Krypton. General Zod, just go to sleep, you are already too tired. Episode 60. Trouble is coming. Swish. The wound continued to bleed, and the blood was instantly poured onto the ground, accumulating a large pool of blood. General Zod's face was full of disbelief, and then he could not help laughing when he heard the assassination announcement from the adjutant Fiora. Ha ha. The laughter was full of desolation, and everyone present was stunned. They didn't expect such a dramatic performance. General Zod was assassinated by the second-in-command and deputy commander Fiora? Even the Kryptonians who firmly support General Zod can't believe this is a reality. Bang. When the sharp supreme blade was taken out, Zod's body could no longer support it, and he had to fall forward with a bang, and the sound of a bang sounded like a heavy blow in the hearts of everyone. A generation of heroes, General Zod fell like this. Fiora put away her sharp blade, stood directly on Suchin's right hand, knelt down on one knee. Qian Li's body was as straight as a sword, and said respectfully, "Welcome the arrival of the savior. Now the entire world engine number respects you. Absolutely obey all your orders." The frost-like face also revealed words without a trace of emotional fluctuations, and Fiora was like a respected female official speaking very competent words. This time, the whole situation exploded in an instant. Zod is dead, and no one can convince the crowd. What other choices are there for the people at the scene? It is our mission to revive Krypton, and you are still obsessed with letting go of the small grievances in the past? Fiora's cold words came directly. The neat black short hair is windless and automatic, and the self-cultivating black armor not only perfectly sets off the bumpy figure, but also faintly exudes a heroic vigor. That pair of slightly frowning eyebrows, not angry but arrogant, makes people feel a little terrified. In an instant, more and more Kryptonians were already rushing to the right. More importantly, the people who were already swaying had no choice at all. They could only resign and follow the destined savior of Krypton. Like a receding wave, the bare reef was exposed at once, but after a while, there were only 4 remaining warriors left on Su Chen's left. Moreover, there are also 4 strategically scarce Kryptonian warriors. 3 seconds. Su Chen reminded him for a while. Just now, he had given them 1 minute to choose, and those who were still standing on the left after more than 1 minute were regarded as enemies. Fiora stared at them coldly. In the 3 seconds when the air was solidified like this, the 4 people remained unmoved, but looked at General Zod, who was lying on the ground with a sad expression. The time has come. All at once. Before Su Chen could start, the person on the opposite side shouted with a sad expression, "It's not that we betrayed Krypton, it was Krypton that couldn't help us." The voice just fell. The strong wind that broke through the air kept coming, and several figures rushed over directly. Fiora didn't say much and flew straight ahead, not to mention her slender figure, but with such a tall and unique figure, it contained a terrifying explosive power. A latecomer came first, and by his own strength, he was the first to push a Kryptonian warrior against the wall. But the rest of the Kryptonian warriors looked at death as if they were at home, and their faces were filled with grief and indignation, and they rushed towards Su Chen regardless. Looking at the figure who challenged him, Su Chen raised his eyebrows, and the figure suddenly flew out like a sharp arrow. He advocated the collision of forces. Bang! At the moment when the soldiers met, the 2 figures were knocked out by themselves, and the majestic brute force was like being knocked out by a locomotive, while the other figure had no luck, and was firmly grasped by Su Chen, ruthlessly. Hold the throat and throw it directly to the ground. Boom! When he landed, a cloud of gunpowder smoke exploded. Su Chen was ready to kill, but he did not stay behind as he did for the sake of his compatriots. The strength of his wrists continued to grow, and with a click, the cartilage in his throat was together with the cartilage. The entire cervical vertebra was crushed by him. The entire figure lying on the ground was no longer able to struggle, and died directly. The 2 figures on the other end, who had just recovered their breath, rushed forward in a desperate manner, without any tricks at all, just like an irrational bull sprinting forward. Unreasonable waste. Su Chen's eyes flashed a red light, and his hot eyes swept over, and the 2 figures flying in mid-air were directly cut off by the waist. The hot sight, which contained more scorching energy, tore an open crack in the ceiling behind. Puff! Fiora, who suppressed the last Kryptonian warrior, stabbed the backhand again, and the black armor was like a piece of paper, and the body was penetrated directly. Fiora withdrew the tiny blade, flicked her wrist, and the blood poured on the ground like splashing ink. But right now. Boom! The violent explosion sound suddenly came from the inside of the battleship, and a huge hole was completely blasted from the inside out, and the entire world engine began to shake violently. Damn! Someone burned all jade and stone, plunged directly into an energy engine, and detonated the furnace. Someone quickly reported the cause of the accident. Fiora's face turned extremely cold in an instant, and she scolded angrily, "Damn, it's my fault, I even ignored this." Apparently, there was General Zod's henchman 567 trying to destroy the Kryptonian battleship. Ding! The alarm sounded continuously, and the entire battleship was filled with red light. The outside atmosphere is constantly rushing into the battleship, and the air quality is abnormal. Fleet personnel are requested to wear roar masks. 35. The atmosphere of the Earth flooded into the entire world engine in an instant, and many people had a strong rejection immediately. Just like Clark rejected the atmosphere of Krypton, the Kryptonians couldn't stand the atmosphere of the Earth, and instantly made them feel powerless. Fortunately, they were already prepared and began to put on roar suction masks one by one. Is it a big problem? Su Chen frowned. Fiora's battle mask was quickly pulled down, and she said respectfully, "It can still bear the range. The world engine has 2 main energy furnaces, one of which is destroyed, and the other furnace can still support, barely able to maintain the flight." State. It's just. Fiora hesitated before speaking and finally said, "The air from the outside continues to come in, and we can't continue to maintain this orbital flight. Now we have to lower the altitude to the ground. The most important thing is that the gravity defense field of the world engine can no longer be opened. In this case, we are likely to face a human counterattack.